G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it.
Welcome everyone. Today for our Quick Fire Friday, I'm interviewing Mick from Grow a Small Business. He's based here in Hobart, Australia with me. We're going to be discussing micromanaging by small business owners. Thanks for your time today, Mick.
My pleasure, Troy.
Tell our audience a bit about you and your experience on this topic. I think, between the three of us, yourself, Rob and I, we've either owned, managed or helped other businesses, over 1,000 businesses across the three of us now. So you'd have a shit ton of experience and you would have seen this curse a lot with small business owners and in small businesses over the decades.
We're working with small business for now 30 years, but last 10 specifically around business coaching and strategy. Certainly the majority, unfortunately, tend to be micromanagers, which tends to be the result of starting small and not necessarily having the help, the coaching, and the understanding of what it means to not micromanage and the benefits to their business.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. I've seen it a lot. I certainly did it early on in my business career as well. Maybe explain to the audience why you think this happens in a small business.
Tends to happen for a number of reasons. No systems and processes would be one of the key things. So a lot of things tend to be in the owner's head, and therefore everyone else doesn't really know how to go about things. It all tends to be very ad hoc, which is sort of a circular thing, because without the systems and processes we can't get consistency, and there's also a lack of trust that can be generated out of that. And the fear of losing control, I think, ultimately is that key driver, which is more of a mindset than reality.
Yeah, I think that's a huge one. I see it with a lot of business owners and even guests on the podcast. They freely admit to being control freaks. I think a lot of us are wired that way. Also because we've got the entire responsibility of the business and the payroll and looking after people's lives on our shoulders. So we tend to put more emphasis on the responsibility we have and get down into the weeds when often it doesn't actually add value. It detracts value from a business.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think obviously small business owners, their financial success is solely dependent on their business a lot of the time. So I think that pressure within themselves, as much as anything, certainly can be overbearing and lead to that fear of losing control.
And that point you made a minute ago about it being in the owner's head, particularly when you're small, say around 5 to 10 team members, that's quite common. Investing in those systems and processes and documentation and training of your team, that is one good way to help you break the cycle of micromanaging and you start to build that trust you said earlier with your team, because they're being more consistent because they're better trained and got better systems.
That's right. It's and in the whirlwind of running a business, the challenge is making sure you dedicate time, and even if it's just half an hour a day. If you can do half an hour a day working on systems and processes, as an example, you make progress rather than putting it off to when you get around to it, which is a typical mindset from business owners, and obviously nothing happens ultimately.
And micromanaging, what does this mean for the business owner?
Well, you don't have a business. You essentially got a job, because you're just wearing too many hats, and a lot of the time it defeats the purpose of why small business owners have their business. And I guess typically being good technicians, they've never been taught or shown how to run a business. So it's a steep learning curve, and it's a bit of a vicious cycle to try and get out of. And also too, the other challenge is you can't grow your business. You're really challenged without I guess, employ more people with the systems and processes to grow your business. And your time should be on the high value aspects of the business, not the lower value work. And our work, and you should be working as a business owner on the $300 hour work.
Yeah, and that's a great point. It reminds me of one of my favorite Steve Jobs quotes, which is, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. So getting out of the way, especially of that lower value work, the business owners, a lot of value creation is in marketing and management, leveraging a team. But if you're there doing a team member's work for them, or, far too much into the weeds, that's taking away from where all those value generation time is.
Yes, absolutely. And ultimately, the employees get frustrated because they're not empowered. There's a blockage, and ultimately they leave. So it can be a pretty steep downward spiral.
Yeah, I've seen it, and I've done that to employees as well, and have seen their motivation drop because you're not giving them feedback, you're not coaching them, you're not delegating. And exactly what we're talking about here right now is micromanagement, and that is quite demoralizing for team members. So what do you need to do to eliminate micromanagement in a small business?
I think first and foremost, you've got to have the right mindset with clarity around your vision that you want for the business. So once you've got that, as well as documented and very clear core values for your people, which then sort of regulates behaviours. As I mentioned before, systems and processes is so critical, like an operations manual, a sales playbook. Essentially, it's like any franchise. Like at one extreme of McDonald's, they're built on the back of systems and processes. So that's probably the best way to look at that.
It's from the great book from Michael E. Gerber, The E-Myth. He very much talks about the turnkey business, where you could throw the operations manual at someone else and they could run the business, throw them the keys at the same time. And he's the one that introduced those terms, technician, manager, and entrepreneur.
Yes, and I guess now you mentioned it, it's certainly would be a good book for small business owners to read if they haven't, because I think that would start to help them with their mindset around this micromanagement issue. Trust is another one. You've got to have trust in your people, and that takes time. But equally, like I mentioned earlier, you need some of the foundational pieces like systems and softwares and core values to help with that. Softwares these days is a huge opportunity to help with micromanagement in that part of your systems and processes, and that's the way you do things at your organisation, where software also helps with automation. And ultimately, it's then getting the right people in the right roles and making sure they're accountable. You've got to invest in your people. Otherwise, you end up with maybe B or even worse C players, and even worse, your A players leave.
Yeah, totally. Can you share some examples of where you've seen value unlocked from small business owners stopping this bad habit?
Yes, sometimes it actually comes from certain events, and coincidentally, I was talking to a new client earlier today, where they've run their business for 17 years. It's husband-wife operation. The husband is the manager, if you like, and he admitted that for 17 years, until 3 months ago, he was a micromanager, where they finally realised they wanted to look at selling the business. So with some help and guidance, they've started to put in place systems and processes, employed a salesperson that was also his role. And that's where I think he's seen the benefits of having somebody doing a lot of the things he was doing that he trusts, where he can sort of step back and not micromanage. I think, interestingly, he had a bit of a fall as well on his bike, which sort of put things in perspective. So like I say, sometimes events can rattle the cage, so to speak, as far as the mindset. But that was, a very good example. And they've been putting things in place like software and automation around that, and making sure they've got the right people.
Be the change you want to see in your business. Become more productive and less stressed with our free Transform Your Performance online course. Once you see the benefits, put your entire team through the course at no cost. We start out by telling you the secret to guaranteed success, then over 100 lessons help you be more focused, present, productive, and feel more in control about work. growasmallbusiness.com.
I think not just only life events or thinking about exiting, but people can just get worn down with the pure hours they need to put into their small business. So one of the first ports of call I go to is ask, right, what can you delegate? What can you stop doing and give to other people? And I think the other big value point is that if you are delegating well, the decision-making across the business is a lot more efficient and faster. And so that flows, therefore, onto the better customer experience. I've had a couple of experiences in the last 6 months with businesses I've worked with or bought things from, where it's been held up because the owner wanted to look over the last details, etc., and just could not let go. And it was quite frustrating because the timeline was probably double what it needed to be.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think, and also, being clear on everyone's roles and their lanes. Otherwise, you can just be inefficient, waste time, and as a result of the micromanagement.
I'm sure you've come across this. I've heard and seen it a lot and experienced it early on in my career as well. Is it's really hard to let go, but you've got to stick with it. Letting go, delegating, and trusting your team. They're going to fuck up. They're going to make mistakes. You've got to just step into that chapter, understanding that and supporting them. So you're not going to get it 100% right the way I do it, etc. But we're going to work on this together because I really want you to own this and I want to hand this over to you. And the team members want that. They want more challenging work, interesting work. It's often rated higher than pay on the reason why people work in a workplace, which is usually the fifth reason. So people actually want more work and more interesting, challenging work. It's up to the owners to change their mindset and go, it's time to let go and get through that quagmire of training and handover, which is going to be painful. But once you're through the other side, it can be bliss.
It's just that starts with that mindset. Building the habit, like anything new, it's just practice, which builds the habit. And as you made mention, it's a collaborative approach, a team approach. And so people are going to fuck up at the end of the day. You've just got to accept that. You can't have perfection. As long as obviously the fuck ups aren't significant, which is, with a lot of things we're talking about, isn't the case. And you just keep improving from there as you sort of practice what you put in place.
Yeah. I remember this, I can't remember who the guest was on the cast, but last year I had someone, he'd been running his business for 10 or 15 years when I interviewed him, but he admitted, he said by day 3 of starting his business, he started with a few team members. He said to his team, I'm going to work from home because I'm a micromanager and I can't change this. So this is well before COVID, obviously. So he actually went to the extreme of ostracizing himself physically from the rest of the team so he wouldn't dabble with their work, look over their shoulder and do all the frustrating and infuriating things that we all have experienced as individual contributors when we've had line managers.
Yeah, well, that's part of the mindset, isn't it? Acknowledging that you are a micromanager and then started changing the mindset and then build that habit.
Well, to wrap this up, what is at least one thing you'd recommend a small business owner does on Monday based on your knowledge and expertise in this area to improve or become no longer a micromanager?
Like I mentioned just a little while ago when you mentioned the E-Myth, I think reading the E-Myth, but also go over to Manager Tools, which is the #1 downloaded business podcasts and listen to some casts on delegation. There's probably some, quick wins from downloading that great podcast, but the E-Myth overlaying that would be a really good read as well. So there's two things you can start on Monday to start to build a better mindset around this, and then start to put things in place.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, as we've touched on, build the habit. It takes 2 months to build a new habit or change a habit, and be patient and let the team members know that you want to go through this transition and you need their support. So I think building that habit is very important. And I'd also be saying to business owners, continually ask yourself, what can I delegate? And the few CEOs that I work with at the moment, and they tell me their time poor and stressed, etc. And when they raise that, I say, right, what can you stop doing, or what can you delegate? What are you dabbling in? So, having that question every day, what can I delegate?
Yep, good. That's a very good tip.
Great. Well, thanks for your time today, Mick.
Enjoyed it. Talk again.
And for our audience, we would greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.